When Eric and I first moved in, I remember thinking how lucky we were. We found this place on a quiet street in Milwaukee, tree-lined, peaceful. One of those neighborhoods that feels like it hasn't changed since the 70s. The kind of place where the mailboxes are still mounted on front porches, and people say things like, "Morning," when you're walking the dog. It felt like a fresh start. We were both coming off stressful jobs and long commutes, and the idea of slowing down, even just for a year, sounded amazing. We were renting the top unit of a duplex. The bottom was occupied by a retired nurse named Harriet, who baked pies and talked about her late husband like he still lived there. She was sweet, kind of like a sitcom grandma, always offering extra baked goods and asking us if we were getting enough sleep. The house next door, though, that was different. It looked abandoned, like the kind of place that should have a foreclosure sign or a warning taped to the door. Paint peeling, front steps warped, blinds sagging in every window. The shutters looked like they'd fall off in the next strong wind. We figured it was just one of those old properties no one had gotten around to fixing up. It didn't bother us. Actually, it made the street feel even quieter. The attic window faced our bedroom. I noticed it the first night we unpacked. I pulled the curtains back and saw that little circular window up top, crusted with dirt. Just an old, dusty pane staring out from under the roofline. I remember telling Eric it looked like an eye. Something about it gave me a weird feeling. He laughed. The first time I saw someone there, it was maybe a week later. I couldn't sleep. It was around 2 a.m. I got up to grab water and ended up scrolling on my phone by the window. That's when I looked up and saw it, a silhouette. Just standing there, not moving, behind the attic glass. It was too dark to see details, but you know when you can just tell a person is there? It was like that. The shape was unmistakable, upright, watching. I told Eric the next morning, kind of laughing as I brought it up. "We have an attic ghost," I said. He rolled his eyes. "Probably a weird shadow or your reflection. That place is empty." I believed him, at first. But then I saw it again and again, always around the same time, late, always in the same spot, the same motionless outline behind the attic glass. I started keeping the curtains closed, but I couldn't unsee it. Sometimes I'd peek just to check, and there it was, every time, like clockwork. Eric started getting annoyed. "Babe, you're psyching yourself out. It's probably just junk in the window. Boxes or a mannequin or something. No one's lived there in years." Still, it didn't sit right with me. So one Saturday afternoon, I walked over. The front yard was overgrown. Dead leaves had piled up around the steps. The mailbox was rusted shut, and the house number was barely visible. I stood at the base of the steps and looked up at the attic window. It looked empty now, just glass and grime. I was about to turn back when I noticed something. A curtain, just barely pulled aside, then dropping back into place. I backed away, fast. Sleep? Yeah, that didn't happen that night. I tossed and turned all night. I started noticing little things after that. Scratching sounds at night, light movement across the window, like someone pacing. Once I thought I heard a voice, just a whisper but enough to stop me cold. Not words, just sound, low and strange. Eric told me to stop watching so many true crime documentaries. "You're letting your imagination win," he said. So I let it go. I tried. Then it snowed. It was a Monday morning. Early. I was getting ready for work and stepped out onto the porch to warm up the car. And then I saw the footprints. Just one set. Fresh. Leading from the sidewalk up the front path of the house next door. And stopping at the door. There were no prints leaving. Just entering. I called Eric out. He looked. He finally looked. But he just rubbed his face and said, "Okay, that's weird, but maybe it's a squatter. Could be harmless." That wasn't comforting. That evening, I couldn't help myself. I waited until after dinner, bundled up, and crossed the yard with a flashlight. The snow was still untouched. I followed the prints up the steps. The door was closed but not latched. I pushed it open. The air inside smelled like wet plaster and mildew. I stepped in, shining my light over the living room. Old furniture, wallpaper curling off the walls. No sound, no movement. I should have left, but I didn't. I found the staircase and started up. Each step creaked like it was announcing me. The air grew colder as I climbed. When I reached the top, I turned toward the attic door. It was closed. My hand was right above the knob, but I couldn't move. Then the door slammed. From the inside, I bolted, ran back to the house. Eric met me on the porch, freaked out, asking what happened. I couldn't even speak, just pointed. We called the non-emergency police line. They sent a car. An hour later, the officer checked the place but said it was empty. Said the attic was locked from the inside and that there was no one up there. Probably wind, he said, or a raccoon. I asked how a raccoon made those footprints. He didn't answer. We bought blackout curtains the next day. I started keeping a journal. Every night I checked the window. I wrote it down. Every sound, every flicker. I even started taking photos from our upstairs window, trying to catch something. Anything. But eventually, the sighting stopped. No more figure. No more footsteps. No more open curtains. Weeks passed, then months. One night, after coming home from a late work event, I looked up by habit, and the attic window was open. No figure, no shadow, just an empty black circle where the glass had once been. Whoever or whatever was up there wasn't anymore. The first time we met, I felt bad for her. She looked lost, fragile, in a way that made you want to wrap a blanket around her and bring her tea. There was something in her eyes, distant, like she was always halfway between the present and a memory. We had just moved into the house across the street. Me and my two kids, 9 and 12. Fresh start after a long, drawn-out divorce. The place wasn't anything special, just a modest home on a quiet street in Tucson, with a small front yard and sun-bleached yellow paint. It was June 2016. The heat was already brutal, and I was juggling part-time remote gigs in graphic design while trying to give the kids some kind of normal summer. She came over the day after we moved in. I was still unpacking boxes in the living room when someone knocked. I opened the door, and there she was, small, maybe 5 feet tall, in her late 70s or early 80s. She wore a faded pink cardigan over a dress with little daisies on it, and her white hair was pulled into a bun that was coming undone. She looked like someone's sweet grandma. She smiled and said, "Anna?" I shook my head gently. "No, I think you have the wrong house." But she didn't seem to hear me. She stepped closer and held out a photo, a worn-out photo of a young woman holding a baby. "See? You were just this big when I brought you home." The woman in the photo did resemble me. Same dark hair, same square jaw. For a second, it felt like looking into someone else's memory. Familiar, but not mine. "I'm sorry," I told her, carefully. "My name's Rachel. I just moved in with my kids." She blinked a few times, clearly struggling to process what I said. Then she smiled again, but this time it felt strained, like she was forcing herself to make it real. "You always were a jokester, Anna. I'll see you soon." I stood there a while after she walked away, watching her shuffle back across the street and disappear into the old brick house with sun-faded curtains and a mailbox held together by duct tape. That night, over frozen pizza, I told the kids. My daughter shrugged. Creepy, but harmless. Except she came back. The next afternoon. Then the next morning. Then again the following day. Each time with a new photo, each time calling me Anna. Sometimes she brought food. Burnt cookies wrapped in wax paper. Once a tuna casserole that smelled like melted plastic. I accepted them with a smile and quietly threw them away after she left. The first week I was patient. I figured she was lonely, maybe confused. The second week I tried being firmer. I'm not Anna, I promise. But she'd get upset. Her eyes would gloss over with tears. She'd whisper things under her breath like, I must be losing her again. Or, why would she lie to me like this? Once, she grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough that it caught me off guard. She looked right into my eyes and said, Don't leave again, please. I started ignoring the doorbell. I told the kids not to answer it. We kept the blinds closed. She still came. Every day, sometimes twice. She'd just stand outside and wait. Then came the night visits. The first one was around 3 a.m. I heard a creak downstairs and assumed the AC had kicked in. But then I heard the television. Not a program, just static. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed downstairs. As I reached the living room, I saw her. She was sitting on the couch in the dark, holding the remote, watching the static, rocking slowly. She was whispering something. I couldn't make out the words. I stood there, not sure if I was dreaming. How did you get in? I asked, my voice hoarse. She turned slowly, like it took a second for my voice to even get to her. You left the door open, she said. I was waiting for you, Anna. I knew the door was locked. I double-checked every night, but I didn't argue. I backed away and called the police. When they came, they walked her home. One officer stayed behind, said there was no sign of forced entry. Maybe I forgot. Maybe it didn't latch. Maybe. They told me her daughter had died in a car crash. She never accepted it. She lived alone and hadn't been deemed a risk. I called Adult Protective Services. A caseworker showed up 2 weeks later. She was nice, super professional, but you could tell she wasn't emotionally in it. Said unless the woman showed signs of self-harm or violence, there wasn't much they could do. Not a danger. I changed the locks, installed a security bar, put cameras at the front and back doors. She stopped coming for a while, almost 2 months. Then, one night in September, I woke to a noise I still think about. It was soft but sharp, like a broken music box trying to play. I checked the cameras, nothing on the front, nothing on the back. I walked the hall. My daughter's door was cracked open. Inside, the old woman was sitting at the edge of her bed, crying, holding a kitchen knife. My daughter was frozen under the blankets, her eyes wide, breathing shallow. Why do you keep running away from me, Anna? The woman whispered. Why do you keep hiding? I sat on the floor slowly, keeping my voice low. I spoke to her like I was calming a scared child. I talked about tea and the weather and how we could sit on the porch in the morning. I reached out, gently took the knife from her. She let go. As soon as I had it in my hand, I stood up and quietly stepped out of the room to call the police. This time, they didn't let her go home. They placed her in a long-term care facility. The doctor said she had advanced neurocognitive disorder. She didn't remember entering my house, didn't know she'd scared us. To her, it was all a moment that belonged in a different time. We moved 6 months later. The kids needed distance. So did I. My daughter especially hasn't been the same. She used to be bubbly, loud, the kind of kid who'd belt out songs from the back seat and fall asleep with the lights off. Now, she double-checks every lock before bed. She insists on sleeping with her door shut tight and wedges a chair beneath the handle most nights. Once, I found her sleeping in her closet with a flashlight clutched to her chest. She doesn't like to talk about it. I've asked gently in the moments when she seems less guarded. But she just shakes her head and says, "I'm fine, Mom." So I let it go. Sometimes silence is safer than remembering. When we got that house in Raleigh, it felt like a win. I remember thinking, man, we actually lucked out with this one. A little worn around the edges, but cheap and close to campus. My roommate, Jess, and I were both sophomores at the time. She was the type who labeled her leftovers and always had earbuds in. I was more chaotic, I guess. We balanced each other out. The house had creaky stairs, scuffed wood floors, and a weird smell in the hallway that never quite went away. Somewhere between mothballs and dust. But it felt like college. Lived in. A little wild. Ours. The guy downstairs, Donnie, seemed harmless enough. A little quiet, maybe in his late 20s. Always wore those black cargo pants that kind of swished when he walked. When we first met him, he was nice enough. Said hi when we passed him, offered to carry up a heavy package once, never gave off any red flags. He even chatted with Jess once about local coffee shops, told her where the best almond croissants were, and asked if we liked cats because he sometimes left food out for a stray that came around. He smiled a lot. That kind of disarming smile that made you feel guilty for ever assuming the worst. That was September. By the time October rolled around, Jess and I were deep in midterms and barely home. She mentioned one night that Donnie gave her weird vibes, but I didn't think much of it. I was too busy juggling classes and work. Then that one weekend in early November, she left to visit her parents in Charlotte. I didn't mind being alone. I had a paper to write, a fridge full of snacks, and plans to catch up on trash TV. I even lit a candle, something warm and cinnamony, and played music while I cleaned. I remember thinking how nice it was to have the space to myself for once. The first night was quiet. I made mac and cheese, curled up under a blanket, and crashed early. But around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hey, sorry if this is weird. Just wanted to say goodnight. I stared at it for a second, then replied with, "Who is this?" No answer. I figured it was a wrong number. Whatever. I went to bed. The next day, another text. "I heard you drop something in the kitchen. Everything okay?" This time I didn't reply, because yeah, I had dropped a spoon earlier, and I hadn't said anything out loud. The kitchen is at the back of the apartment, and the only thing that kind of made sense that crossed my mind was that Donnie's unit was directly below ours. But it didn't make sense, unless he was already listening in somehow. I started running through possibilities. Maybe he was standing right beneath the floorboards. Maybe he'd found some way to spy on us. Jess's friends pulling a prank. Another text came through about an hour later. "That red hoodie looks good on you." I was wearing it. I jumped up and yanked all the blinds closed. I stood in the center of the room trying to stay calm. Then I locked the front door, deadbolt and all, and moved to the kitchen. The balcony door has this flimsy little lock and a latch I never really bothered with. I locked it this time. Both. Then I moved back to the couch and tried to focus on the show playing. Every little noise outside made me flinch. About 10 minutes later, another message. "You forgot the latch on the balcony door. I locked it for you." I stared at that one for what felt like a year. Then I threw my phone across the room. I don't even remember walking to the door. I just remember flinging it open and yelling into the night. "Who the hell are you?" No answer. But I heard it. That swish. Those black cargo pants. The next morning, I went down to talk to Donnie. I knocked. No answer. I texted Jess, told her everything. She told me to stay upstairs out of sight and call the landlord. I did. While I waited for the callback, another text came in. "You don't have to be scared. I was just making sure you were safe." I blocked the number. Didn't help. The messages kept coming. Slightly different numbers, same tone. That afternoon, I invited my friend Rachel over. She lived 2 streets away and came by with a bat and a flashlight. We searched the apartment together, checking under beds, behind shower curtains, even inside the oven for some reason. Nothing. She stayed until late and promised to swing by again the next morning. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps right above me, on the roof. Our unit didn't have roof access. I stayed completely still, holding my breath. The footsteps moved slowly toward the edge of the building, then stopped. I waited. Nothing. I checked all the windows, turned on every light. Nothing. That morning, a letter was slid under the door. It was a printed message. I like when you make tea. You hum when you wait for the kettle. It makes you seem real. No name. No return address. I called the police. They came, took a report, but said unless there was a direct threat or a break-in, there wasn't much they could do. I asked about Donnie. One officer went to knock on his door. He answered this time, said he hadn't heard anything, didn't know what I was talking about, acted confused, too confused. But I saw it, in his eyes. That flicker of recognition gave him away. They couldn't do anything. Not really. Not yet. I bought a door jammer, a can of pepper spray, and stayed up all night the next few days. Nothing happened. For a while. Then, the last weekend before Thanksgiving, Jess came back. I hadn't told her everything. I didn't want to freak her out. We were already talking about finding a new place in the spring. I figured I could just hang on until then. That Saturday night, she found something. A hole in the wall behind the bookshelf. Not a big one, just wide enough to peek through. It looked directly into our living room. We pulled the shelf away and found an old vent cover with a cracked corner. When we looked closer, it wasn't just the living room. There were more holes, tiny ones in the bedroom, the bathroom. I couldn't breathe. We called the landlord, demanded to break the lease early. He came by 2 days later and didn't argue. We moved out that week. We never found proof it was Donnie. No cameras, no confessions, nothing solid. Just texts, paper notes, peepholes we hadn't noticed before, and that awful tension in the air that wouldn't leave. No matter how much time passes, that weird feeling, like someone's just outside watching, never really goes away. It took us weeks to find a new place. Every apartment felt wrong. Too exposed, too quiet, too close to strangers. Jess and I started carrying pepper spray everywhere, and I sleep with my phone in hand, thumb hovering over 911. I never leave a balcony door unlocked anymore. Not ever. I work at a convenience store in Missoula, Montana. Graveyard shifts mostly, which means I get home just in time to watch the moon pack it in and let the sun start its lazy crawl over the mountains. Sleep? Overrated. At least that's what I tell myself after my third cup of shitty black coffee. When you work nights long enough, your body forgets how to sleep like a normal human. You learn to exist in that in-between state. Half awake, half wired, always a little on edge. Anyway, I live in the top half of a duplex a few blocks from the store. The kind of place you rent when you're in your 30s and realize you're too old for roommates, but too broke for anything decent. It's got its quirks. Creaky stairs, a kitchen from the 80s, a heater that sounds like it's coughing, and a lingering smell of mildew in the walls no matter how much Febreze you spray. But it's quiet. Or it used to be. The bottom half's been rented out by a guy named Travis. Mid-40s, I think. Tall, but slouchy. Always wearing those weird orthopedic sneakers and this green beanie, no matter the weather. We've exchanged maybe 10 words since I moved in. He doesn't answer the door when I knock. Packages pile up at his front step. Never any music, never any lights. Once I joked to a friend that I was living above a ghost. Nobody ever saw him leave, and nobody ever saw anyone visit him. But then I started hearing things. just small, repetitive scraping sounds late at night. I'd get home around 3:30 a.m., kick off my shoes, nuke whatever leftovers I had, and sit in front of the TV to wind down. That's when I'd hear it, faint but clear. Scrape, then a pause, then another scrape, almost like someone slowly dragging a stick across cement. I figured Travis was just weird. Maybe he was one of those people who rearranged furniture compulsively. Maybe he had a pet. Maybe he was building something. I tried to write it off. Everyone has their quirks. Then came the dragging. It was louder, heavier, like someone was hauling a dead tree across the floor. I'd sit there frozen, listening to it shift across the floorboards below me, slow and uneven, as if it took effort. It went on for several minutes at a time. Sometimes it stopped suddenly, and I'd lean forward to listen harder, only for it to start again just as I relaxed. I tapped on the floor once, just to see if he'd stop. He didn't. A few days later, I asked our landlord, Don, if he'd heard from Travis lately. Don shrugged and said, Travis paid rent on time, so he didn't care what the guy did as long as he wasn't lighting fires. Typical Don. If the place wasn't literally burning, he didn't want to deal with it. That night, I came home to something new. A growl. I swear I'm not making this up. It wasn't a human voice. It sounded like a large dog with a throat full of gravel. One long, low growl that seemed to vibrate through the floor and right into my bones. I paused mid-bite of a reheated burrito, holding my breath as the sound dragged on. I turned everything off and just listened. It didn't happen again. But after that night, I couldn't relax. I'd find myself listening for it, waiting. I started leaving the hallway light on. I kept a hammer next to my bed. Not a bat, a hammer. I don't even know why. Maybe because it felt heavier in my hand. More final. The worst part? The basement door. It's in the hallway between the two units and leads to this shared laundry space and storage area. Usually locked, always locked. I checked it once out of curiosity when I first moved in. It creaked but didn't budge. Until it wasn't. One Sunday afternoon, I came home early from a shift and saw it swinging open. Just barely. Like someone hadn't closed it all the way. I should have walked upstairs. I should have minded my business. But I didn't. Curiosity is a hell of a thing. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. It smelled like wet cardboard and something old. The kind of scent that clings to basements and attics and things people don't want to remember. The stairs groaned under me as I moved down slowly, dust dancing in the beam of my light. Boxes, shelves, dusty tools, an old exercise bike. Nothing alarming. Then I saw the tarp. It was crumpled in the far corner, tucked behind a shelf. Something about it looked wrong. Not just the way it was bunched up, but the shape underneath it. Uneven. Like there was something, or someone, beneath it. I took 2 steps forward. Something moved. Just a twitch. But enough. I bolted back up the stairs and slammed the door shut. I even shoved a chair in front of it, like that would help. My heart was pounding. Not in fear, but in that stunned, disoriented way you get when your brain hasn't caught up with what your body just did. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I kept waiting for some noise. Footsteps, banging, anything. Even silence felt loud. My ears were straining for anything and everything. Nothing, until Wednesday. I came home from work and found a note taped to my door. Thanks for stopping by. Didn't expect company. No name. Just that. Handwritten in tiny, precise print. I didn't know what to do. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell the landlord. I just waited. Every creak of the stairs, every shifting breeze outside made my pulse spike. 2 days later, Travis was gone. No moving van, no boxes, just gone. His car wasn't in the driveway. The mailbox was empty. The apartment, locked, dark, dead. I texted Don. He said Travis had moved out suddenly, didn't leave a forwarding address, just dropped the keys in his mailbox and disappeared. No explanation. A week after that, I tried the basement door again. Locked. Still is. Sometimes when I come home late, I stand at the top of the stairs and listen, just to see if I still hear anything. Something shifting behind the locked door. Something dragging. Something breathing. So far, nothing. But that smell, that old, damp, rotting smell, it's still there. And sometimes when I least expect it, I think I hear the stairs creak. Just once. Then nothing again. If you thought the scariest part was the neighbor, wait until they follow you to the grocery store. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop how you would have handled these nightmare scenarios. And if you think stalking only happens in the movies, click now to watch 4 very scary stalker horror stories. Because the scariest part, they already know where you live. Stay ready, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.